welcome to part 2 of the Imposter Syndrome series. Alright, have you watched part 1? If you have, you will have started spotting how your imposter feelings are showing up for you, how imposter syndrome is cropping up in your life, and what the cost of it is to you. If you haven't watched it, head on back and watch part 1 first before we delve in deeper here in part 2 into what's really behind imposter syndrome, what's causing you to feel like an imposter in your life despite all of your achievements and accomplishments. Because here's the thing, imposter syndrome typically shows up in people who are pretty high achievers. The thinking behind this is that people who are stretching themselves out of their comfort zone and always going for the next level, the next thing, getting out of their comfort zone more often, have got more opportunities to keep reinforcing that belief, if they hold it already, that they're an imposter. So it could be that imposter syndrome is holding you back and keeping you afraid of doing things for fear of being exposed as a fraud. Or it could be that you're a super high achiever and it just doesn't add up or make sense as to why you still have these lingering thoughts and beliefs of being an imposter. Which way it is for you, I'm going to show you now how to understand what's driving your imposter syndrome and keeping you stuck in it. And then keep watching for part 3, because that's when we're going to start to unpack it, and I'm going to give you some tools to change it once and for all and step into self-belief instead. So there are 3 main things I'm going to touch on in this video. The first is something called competence types. The second is your imposter lens, the lens through which you are seeing yourself and the world and making sense of things, and how maybe it's skewing things and making it all a bit distorted. And 3, a process of thinking that you will be playing out without even realizing it, that is reinforcing your imposter beliefs and stopping you from stepping into confidence and boosting your self-esteem when you do achieve things. So we're going to break these down and I'm going to whiz through them. If you want to know more and to work on this in more detail, head on over to my website, clareflaxen.com, and you can see all the things I offer around working on your imposter syndrome, whether that's in my mindset membership for women or the masterclass specifically on imposter syndrome, or doing some one-to-one work if that feels like your bag right now. Head on over and you'll get all the details over there. Right, first up is your competence types. Now, if you have read anything about imposter syndrome already, you might be aware of these. If you haven't, this is likely going to be a new term for you. It's not something that's spoken about very widely, but it's key to understanding your imposter syndrome. Now, your competence types are 5 types that psychologists who've researched and studied imposter syndrome have come up with to understand and describe when you are falling into very narrow definitions of what counts as a success or an achievement. And this is a problem because when you have such narrow, rigid definitions, when things inevitably fall outside of those definitions, you take that as evidence that your achievements don't count. It wasn't really an achievement because you didn't do it this way, because it didn't happen that way, because it didn't meet your expectations or your set of beliefs, the rules that you're holding about what constitutes success. So I'm going to break down the 5 types for you and I want you to see which you are. Now, quick tip. You might be one main type out of the 5 that I give you now, or you might find that there's a few that you recognize cropping up for you. Maybe in different scenarios, different types show up. One's not right or wrong. You might have a primary one that feels super strong and that's your go-to, or you might identify with a few. Pick as many as you feel are causing issues in your life or are beliefs that you hold quite strongly. First up is the perfectionist. Now, this will be a term that you will have heard of before. Perfectionism is often a key trait in imposter syndrome, but if you are a perfectionist, it doesn't necessarily mean you have imposter syndrome. It can be a separate thing that shows up in different ways and isn't related to imposter syndrome. In this instance, the perfectionist trait in you will be holding yourself to very high, unattainably high standards. And when you fail to meet those standards, you see yourself as an imposter. you see yourself as not valid, as a fake, as a fraud, who shouldn't really be doing what you're doing, because really, you're not good enough, you're not good at it. It's not perfect, therefore you feel that you're an imposter, and you fear that other people are going to see it as well. So you're holding this rigid definition that unless it's perfect, it doesn't count as a success. And you are doing whatever you can to nail perfect, to show yourself that you are not an imposter, although that never really lands because nothing ever is perfect. There's always a way that you discredit or discount your achievement. But also you're trying to cover up other people from seeing you as that as well, from stopping yourself from being exposed as an imposter. So you work doubly hard. You overwork at things that don't really warrant that level of time and attention. You feel very stressed and very anxious when you have to do something that's got the potential to not be perfect, or for others to see you as less than perfect. And you find it really hard to delegate, to let go of control and let other people step in and do things, because they're not going to meet your standards either. So if you are the perfectionist competence type, you might well find yourself saying things like, if you want a job done well, you might as well do it yourself. Oh, it's just quicker to do it myself. And how to spot if you've got perfectionist traits? Well, you're the person who, when you get great feedback after you've done, I don't know, a talk or a presentation, you don't believe it, because all you're honing in on are the minute details that didn't go to plan, the bits that went wrong. You discount everything else that went well, and all you focus on is the perceived negative bits. If you get feedback from somebody else, you get a compliment, or you get feedback on some work you've done, and there's one bit that could be improved on, you feel rubbish. That's all you focus on, is that one bit. And to you, that means the rest can't be true, because it wasn't perfect. If there was one bit to be improved, that means everything else doesn't count. Do you see how it works, how it keeps you stuck in this very narrow definition of what counts as a success? Second up is the soloist. Now, the soloist believes that in order for something to really count as an achievement, you have to do it all by yourself. It only counts, you are only really good at what you're doing and competent if you can do it by yourself, if you can do it all. So if you work as a team, you find it very difficult to see your contribution and your role. And if you have to ask for help, well, that feels like an admittance of being a fraud. And in fact, you probably won't ask for help, because that would feel really uncomfortable, because then other people would see that really you're an imposter. Because if you weren't, you'd be able to do this on your own. It keeps you feeling isolated, it keeps you struggling on, and it makes it far more difficult to actually get your achievements if you won't let anybody help you. Now, the next one is the natural genius. This one believes that in order for something to count as a success or an achievement, you have to just be naturally good at it. It should flow, it should be effortless. You should just have a natural talent. And if you don't, if you struggle, if something feels difficult to begin with, well, you take that as evidence that you're an imposter, you're a fraud, you shouldn't really be doing this, and you give up. So you might give up way too quickly and not allow yourself the learning curve to develop. Or you might be reluctant to do anything if you don't naturally feel gifted at it, or if you think it's going to be a struggle, because that would feel really uncomfortable for other people to see you as not being naturally good at something. Can you see yourself in any of these so far? Next up is the expert. Now, the expert believes that you should be the expert at anything that you do. You should be the expert in everything in order for you to be valid. And if you're not the expert, if there's something you're not sure that you know, or you see someone else doing something differently and you perceive it to be better, well, you just give up. You won't go there because you're not the expert. So therefore, you're an imposter. The expert finds it difficult to start things because there's always one more training, one more qualification to get, one more book to read, one more bit of research before you'll be ready and know enough to get started. So you can lose a lot of time when you're in that expert competence type. And you can also stop yourself from going out there and trying and taking opportunities because you think you have to be further along than you actually do before you get going. You feel like you have to have all the experience before you've even started. Now, the final competence type is a Superman or Superwoman. Now, this person is a bit like the perfectionist, but they believe they should do not only everything perfectly, but they should be able to do multiple things perfectly. Keep all of those balls juggling without dropping any, without making any mistakes. That they should be able to be everything to everybody. This is how they define success and achievement. And when that's inevitably not possible, they feel like they're failing. They feel like they're an imposter and a fraud. They feel like they're not good enough. So I want you to take a minute, pause this, and just jot down which ones you identify with. The next thing I want to talk about, the next part of the imposter puzzle, is what I call your imposter lens. Now, it's called in psychological terms a confirmation bias or an attention bias, and it's something we all have. It's the way our brains are wired to see patterns, to run with sets of beliefs that are already there. We form these patterns so that we can process and act and respond quicker. If we had to break everything down each time and analyze and reflect and choose and pick and build things up, it would take us too long to function. So we develop this set of beliefs and these patterns about who we are, how the world works, how we show up, what we can and can't do. And often they're coming, as are our competence types, from our childhood. They're the messages we got growing up, from parents, from teachers, from the experiences we had. We bed them down, we incorporate them into our sense of the world and ourselves, and then we just run with it without questioning. And because it's all happening on a subconscious level, we're often not even aware of it. So the most important thing you can start doing with imposter syndrome is shining a light on it. It's getting self-aware and understanding and spotting when you are falling into these patterns, and then start questioning them, challenging them a bit. Don't accept them just as blanket truths. Understand that they're a way of making sense of the world. They're a way that we just take on interpretations and meanings. But we do that way back, and then we never question them again. So often we're running with things that aren't valid. They're not accurate, they're distorted. And this is where your confirmation bias, your imposter lens, is a real bugger. Because not only does it just run with a set of beliefs it has, so if you are the perfectionist competence type, that's a set of beliefs. You will automatically look for the imperfect bits. You will automatically look for the evidence that backs up your belief, because that's how you understand yourself. That's how you understand the world to operate. So instead of seeing the bigger perspective with some good bits, some not so good bits, some things you did really well, some things you can improve on, you just go into this rigid, where are the flaws, where are the mistakes, those are the bits that matter, because that's the bit I need to be vigilant about. But in your imposter lens, your confirmation bias goes a step further. If you are faced with evidence that you cannot dismiss as contradictory to your beliefs, if there's something that challenges the beliefs you're holding, so say you give a talk and you get a standing ovation, if there is something that doesn't fit your belief, instead of sitting back and going, oh, that's interesting, that maybe I'm not that bad, maybe even though it wasn't perfect, people really enjoyed it and got something from it and it was still good, that wouldn't fit with this belief system you're holding about how to decide what counts or doesn't count as a success. So your imposter lens then distorts it for you to fit your belief. So you'll come up with all these ways of discrediting what you are seeing in front of your very eyes. So the standing ovation is no longer a reflection of your performance. It's people being kind. It's people feeling absolutely mortified for you that you made all those mistakes, and they're just trying to make you feel better. Or it's fluke, it's luck. They didn't notice those mistakes, but if they had, God, they wouldn't be giving me a standing ovation. Or maybe the bar is set so low, maybe everybody else was so utterly rubbish who went before you, that this by comparison seems good, but really you know that it's not. So we want to watch out for when we are just running automatically with beliefs, and then when we are distorting the evidence that is contradictory to those beliefs. And instead of letting our winds land, we are finding ways to discredit them. And last up in part 2, I want you to think about the thought process that you are going into when you fall into an imposter way of thinking. Now, this thought process is an interesting one because it's what keeps you stuck from letting your wins land and from building up your sense of accomplishment and self-belief. It's keeping you stuck, feeling fearful, anxious, and taking that uncomfortable feeling that we all get when we first do something that's challenging or that we're not sure we can do, when we're in that learning curve, or we're just doing something that makes us feel nervous. The imposter model of thinking takes that as evidence of being an imposter, and then it runs with that. So you feel uncomfortable because you've got to do something that feels big or difficult or challenging, and you take that feeling and go, oh my God, I don't think I can do this. I don't know how to do this. That must mean I'm an imposter. That means I don't know enough. That means I'm not good enough to be doing this. And that anxiety then drives you into your imposter behaviours, where you start to overwork like crazy to try and make sure that nobody else sees that you're an imposter. Or you avoid things because it just feels too uncomfortable. Or you sabotage. You stay up really late watching Netflix when you've got a big meeting the next day. Because those self-sabotage behaviours would be preferable to use as the reason why you didn't perform than really going in and giving it your all and still coming up short. That to you would feel too vulnerable, too exposing. Other people would see that you're an imposter. Then, when inevitably you get away with it, you do it fine, it's a success, instead of letting that land, you use those exact words. You go, phew, got away with it that time. Thank God they didn't notice. I better make damn sure they don't notice next time either. And instead of building your self-esteem, it just keeps you driving into, oh my God, that was lucky, I got away with it. So the next time you feel uncomfortable or you do something challenging, instead of being able to draw on what went before and saying, okay, no, I could do that. I put myself in this before, I challenged myself and I did it. I can learn, I can make mistakes, then it's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect in order to be really good. Instead of having that framework that you operate from, you're just back into, oh, I don't feel like I can do this. I don't know what I'm doing. I feel anxious, and I'm going to respond to that anxiety and that belief that I'm an imposter, and I need to cover that up from everybody else. So spend a bit of time before you go into part 3 of this series and see the ways that these 3 things, your competence types, your imposter lens, and your imposter model of thinking, how are they playing out and how are they coming together to keep you stuck in a false belief that you're an imposter? I'm Clare Flaxen. I'm a cognitive behavioural therapist. If you like what you're hearing, subscribe to this channel and come and check out clareflaxen.com for more tips and tools on shifting your mindset into one of unstoppable confidence. I will see you in part 3.